Hello, and welcome to Sleep with Stories. I'm so glad you're here with us tonight, settling in, getting comfortable. There's nothing you need to do now, nothing at all but to let the day fall away. Let the noise and the busyness fade into the quiet of this moment. You probably won't make it through this story, and that is perfectly all right. The story is here for you, a soft place for your mind to land as you drift off. If you enjoy our journeys into the past, please do consider giving us a like and subscribing to the channel. It helps our sleepy community grow. And feel free to leave a comment letting us know where you're listening from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's always a quiet joy to see how far these stories travel. Now, let your shoulders soften. Let the muscles around your eyes relax. Let's ease into tonight's journey. The first thing you notice is the air. It's thick, carrying the scent of salt, damp earth, and something else. Something sweet and vaguely floral, like night-blooming jasmine struggling to be noticed. Against the heavier aromas of tar and rum, you are standing on the deck of a sloop, rocking ever so gently in the deep, protected waters of a natural harbor. The year is somewhere in the late 1680s, a time when the sun in this part of the world feels just as hot, just as relentless as it does today. The wood beneath your bare feet is warm, almost sticky. The sun has been beating down on it all day, and now, as evening begins to bleed across the sky in shades of bruised purple and soft orange, the deck is giving that heat right back. You are in Port Royal, Jamaica, or as the sailors and merchants and pirates who haunt this place call it, the richest and wickedest city in the New World. Looking out at the town, you can see why it earned at least half of that name. Unlike the crude wooden settlements you might picture, Port Royal is a city of brick. 2, 3, even 4-story buildings are crammed onto the 51 acres of sandy land that make up the port. Their roofs are tiled, their windows feature real glass, and they stand shoulder to shoulder, as if jostling for a better view of the harbor. It looks prosperous, solid, a little piece of London transplanted into the tropics. If London had a serious drinking problem and a flamboyant disregard for the law, a gentle breeze rustles the palm trees that fringe the edges of the town, their fronds whispering secrets to the incoming tide. From the shore, you can hear the low thrum of the city preparing for the night. It's a sound made of 1,000 smaller sounds, the distant clanging of a blacksmith's hammer, not quite ready to quit for the day, the murmur of dozens of conversations spilling out from the open doors of taverns, the faint, high-pitched laughter of women. There were, at last count, 44 licensed tavern keepers in this small stretch of land, which gives you a rough idea of the city's priorities. You can smell roasting meat, the sharp tang of cheap rum, and the ever-present scent of the sea. You're here on business. Not your business, of course. You're just a passenger, a pair of hands, an extra body on a ship that deals in, well, let's call it opportunistic trade. The captain, a man whose face is a roadmap of bad decisions and surprisingly good luck, has just concluded his affairs in the city. And what affairs they were? He, like every other captain who uses this port as a haven, has just paid his dues. Not to the King of England, not directly. No, here in the unofficial capital of the Buccaneers, the governor himself, often a former privateer like the famous Henry Morgan, has a system. A slice of all plunder brought into this harbor goes to the governor's office as a fee, a kind of unofficial tax that keeps the port authorities friendly and ensures a safe place to sell acquired goods. It's a brilliant, simple, and deeply corrupt system that has made Port Royal fabulously wealthy. You lean against the railing, the wood smooth under your hands. You've been in port for 3 days, and the controlled chaos of the city is still a marvel. You saw a man pay a strumpet 500 pieces of 8 just to see her unclothed. You saw another buy a whole pipe of wine and set it in the middle of a dusty street, forcing everyone who passed to have a drink. It's a city running on the adrenaline of newfound riches, a place where a common sailor can return from a voyage with 2 or 3 times the annual salary of a plantation worker, and then spend it all in a single night. It's capitalism on steroids, with a cutlass held to its throat. You hear a soft scraping sound behind you and turn to see one of the crew members. A man named Silas polishing a small, intricately carved box made from tortoise shell. This is one of the more peculiar local crafts. Men sit in the shade of the market, patiently carving scenes of ships and sea monsters into the delicate shells. It's a strange, gentle art form in a city built on violence. Silas handles the box with a reverence that seems out of place for a man whose knuckles are permanently scarred. He catches you looking and gives a slight sheepish shrug. "A gift," he mutters, as if embarrassed by the sentiment. For someone back in Bristol. Historians still debate the true extent of the governor's direct involvement in sanctioning these piratical enterprises. Was it a pragmatic, if cynical, form of civic defense and economic stimulus, or just pure, unadulterated greed? The truth, you suspect, is probably a messy combination of both. You watch as the lights begin to flicker on in the city, the warm glow of lanterns and candles spilling from windows and doorways, painting trembling golden stripes on the dark water of the harbor. The city seems to breathe, a living thing made of brick, rum, and gold. The gentle rocking of the ship is a constant, soothing rhythm. The air grows cooler. The sounds of the city are a distant lullaby. There is nothing more for you to do today. Nothing but rest as the ship waits for the morning tide. The moon is a sliver of bone white hanging in the inky sky, and the ship creaks around you like an old man settling into a comfortable chair. Most of the crew is asleep, scattered across the deck in search of a cool breeze. You found a relatively comfortable spot nestled between some coils of rope that smell faintly of hemp and seawater. The gentle, rhythmic slap of the waves against the hull is a persistent, sleepy drumbeat. From your vantage point, you can still see the lights of Port Royal, a glittering smear against the darkness. It looks almost peaceful from here, afar. Cry from the boisterous, chaotic energy you felt walking its streets earlier. You close your eyes, but sleep doesn't come easy. Your mind replays the scenes of the day. The market, a riot of color and noise, where merchants hawked everything from fine English cloth and pewter dinnerware to exotic birds in bamboo cages. You saw a bewildering array of goods, a testament to the city's status as the most important trading post in the New World, but it wasn't just legal trade. Nearly every merchant and property owner in Port Royal had a stake in the forced trade, a polite euphemism for privateering. They would sponsor voyages, providing ships and supplies, in exchange for a hefty share of whatever was plundered from Spanish ships and settlements. It was a city built on a foundation of stolen silver and gold, a fact that everyone knew and no one seemed to mind. You remember the faces in the taverns, sunburned and scarred, men from every corner of the world, drawn here by the promise of quick riches. You saw a group of them gathered around a table, their heads bent in serious discussion. They weren't just drunkenly swapping stories. They were operating under the Brethren of the Coast, a loose but surprisingly organized coalition of buccaneers and privateers. They had their own codes of conduct, written down and agreed upon by every member of a crew before a voyage. These articles were a strange mix of brutal pragmatism and surprising fairness. They dictated the division of plunder, with the captain receiving a larger share, but every man, even the ship's boys, getting a portion. They even had a system of compensation for injuries sustained in battle. A lost right arm was worth 600 pieces of 8, while an eye or a finger would fetch 100. It was a bizarrely bureaucratic approach to a life of violent chaos, a kind of workers' compensation for the criminally employed, a subtle, Interesting detail you recall is how many of the men wore large gold hoop earrings. They weren't just for decoration. The gold was a form of insurance. If a pirate died in a foreign land or his body washed ashore, the hope was that the earring would be valuable enough to pay for a proper Christian burial. Some even had the name of their home port engraved on the inside, a final, hopeful plea to be returned home. It was a touchingly sentimental tradition for men who made their living by terrorizing the high seas. You wonder about the man you saw earlier, the one who paid a fortune to see a woman naked. Did he wear an earring for his soul too? It's a funny thought. The idea of a man so profligate in life being so concerned with the proprieties of his death is an irony that feels perfectly at home in Port Royal. You shift your position, the rough weave of the rope pressing a pattern into your back. You can hear the low murmur of voices from the captain's cabin. He's in there with the quartermaster going over the ship's articles. Unlike the tyrannical captains of merchant vessels or naval ships, a pirate captain's power was far from absolute. The captain was elected by the crew and could be removed by a majority vote if he proved to be a coward or a fool. The quartermaster, also elected, acted as the crew's representative, distributing supplies, settling disputes, and ensuring the captain didn't overstep his authority. It was a shockingly democratic system for a society of outlaws, a little floating republic of thieves. Of course, this democracy had its limits. Steal from another member of the crew, and you'd have your nose and ears slit before being marooned on a desolate island. So, freedom with an asterisk. A shooting star arcs across the sky, a fleeting silver scratch on the velvet darkness. You think about the sheer amount of money that flowed through this city. One successful raid, like Henry Morgan's on Portobello, could bring in plunder worth more than 7 times the entire island's annual sugar exports. The coins were so plentiful that Port Royal was one of the few places in the New World where hard cash was the preferred method of payment, rather than the more common system of bartering. It was a river of silver, and everyone in town, from the governor down to the Lily's tavern wench, was panning for their share. There's a great deal of scholarly uncertainty about how formalized the Brethren of the Coast truly was. Some see it as a structured syndicate, while others argue it was little more than a loose, informal agreement among like-minded scoundrels. Based on the disciplined way these men conducted their business ashore, you lean toward the former. The air is growing heavy, the earlier coolness giving way to the thick humidity of a Caribbean night. The gentle rocking of the sloop is beginning to work its magic, your thoughts growing slow and disjointed. The clatter and laughter from the city have faded to a dull, distant hum. The ship is a cradle, the sea a metronome, and sleep is finally, mercifully pulling you under. A sliver of pale light appears on the horizon, slowly separating the dark sea from the equally dark sky. The world is still painted in shades of gray and deep blue, but the day is coming. A single hardy rooster crows from somewhere deep in the city, his call thin and lonely in the quiet air. This is the signal. The gentle rocking of the ship, your cradle for the night, is interrupted by the thud of bare feet on the deck. The day begins early on a ship, an unfortunate fact of life for the handful of crew members who are nursing heads full of cheap rum and regret. You sit up, your back stiff from the ropes, and watch as the vessel slowly comes to life. The quartermaster, the one you saw in the captain's cabin last night, emerges onto the deck. He is a broad-shouldered man with a calm, steady presence, and he moves with an economy of motion that suggests years spent on tilting decks. He doesn't shout. He doesn't need to. He speaks in a low, firm voice, and the men respond, moving to their stations with a practiced, if slightly sluggish, efficiency. You see Silas, the man with the tortoise-shell box, carefully stowing his precious cargo in a small sea chest before joining the others at the capstan. You can smell coffee, strong and bitter, being brewed in the galley, a welcome scent that cuts through the morning dampness. You watch as a small group of men begin to heave at the capstan bars, their muscles straining in the cool morning air. They are raising the anchor, a slow, laborious process. The anchor chain groans as it's dragged up from the muddy harbor bottom, each link clanking loudly against the hull. The work is accompanied by a low, rhythmic chant, a call and response. That seems to be less a song and more a way of breathing in unison. It's the sound of collective effort, a human machine working to free itself from the land. As the ship is freed, others scramble up the rigging with a nimbleness that seems to defy gravity, their dark shapes stark against the brightening sky. They untie the sails, which fall with a heavy whoosh, like the exhalation of a great bee's dot as the sails catch the early morning breeze. The ship begins to glide forward, a slow and graceful pivot toward the mouth of the harbor. You drift, past the other vessels still at anchor, past the silent, imposing walls of Fort Charles that guard the entrance. From the water, you get a new perspective on Port Royal. The city is a jumble of brick and tile, packed so tightly onto its sandy spit of land that it seems to be holding its breath. Property here, you've been told, is as expensive as it is in the most fashionable parts of London. This incredible density, a result of the limited space and the immense wealth pouring into the port, makes it one of the most crowded places on Earth. It's a city living on top of itself, every square inch accounted for an monetized dot. Historians often speculate about the lives of the ordinary people, the bakers, the coopers, the wives and children who lived crammed into this wealthy, dangerous city. How did a law-abiding artisan feel, knowing that the silver coin he just received for a barrel of flour was likely chiseled off a Spanish crucifix just a few weeks prior? It must have been a strange and morally flexible existence. Looking at it now, silent and washed in the soft morning light, it's hard to reconcile the city's solid, respectable appearance with its reputation for debauchery. Breakfast is served. It is, for lack of a better word, an event. The ship's cook, a one-eyed man with a surprisingly cheerful disposition, presents a large wooden bowl of something he calls salmagundi. It is a famous dish among the buccaneers, and seeing it for the first time, you understand why it's not more famous everywhere else. It appears to be a chaotic jumble of everything the cook could find: chopped hard-boiled eggs, pickled fish, turtle meat, onions, olives, grapes, and various cured meats, all swimming in a dressing of oil, vinegar, and spices. It is essentially a culinary pirate raid on the ship's larder. You take a cautious portion, it's not terrible. It's salty, sharp, and confusing, but it's food. Eating it feels like a necessary rite of passage, your formal introduction to the strange domesticity of life at sea. The ship clears the harbor now, and the open sea stretches out before you, a vast expanse of deep blue. The sun is higher, warming your face. The sounds of the city fade away, replaced by the creak of the mast, the snap of the sails, and the endless whisper of the water rushing past the hull. The land recedes behind you, a green and brown smudge on the horizon. The air tastes cleaner out here, salty and sharp. The rhythm of the ship takes over, a slow, steady pulse. There is a sense of purpose now, a shared direction. You have left the richest, wickedest city behind and are heading out into the great, unknown blue. There is nothing to do but watch the waves and feel the sun on your skin. Nothing but to let the gentle motion of the sea rock you into a state of deep and profound calm. The island of Jamaica has completely disappeared. There is nothing in any direction but an endless circle of blue where the sea meets the sky. The sun is high and hot, bleaching the color from the wooden deck and casting sharp, dark shadows. The world has been reduced to this small, self-contained universe of wood, canvas, and rope, floating in an immense and indifferent ocean. The initial excitement of departure has settled into the quiet, steady routine of life at sea. Time itself seems to behave differently out here, stretching and compressing in unfamiliar ways. The day is measured not by clocks, but by the changing angle of the sun and the rotation of watches. You have been given a task. It is not a glamorous one. You are to watch a particular section of the horizon. Just watch for hours. It is, you. Reflect, perhaps the most boring job ever created, which makes it an unexpectedly perfect activity for a mind-seeking rest. You lean against the warm side of the ship, your eyes scanning the line where water meets air. The gentle, repetitive motion of the waves, rising and falling, is hypnotic. The ship itself seems to breathe, its timbers groaning and creaking in a steady, reassuring rhythm. Now and then, a flying fish will skitter across the surface of the water, its wings a translucent blur in the sunlight. Other than that, there is nothing. Just the blue. The captain and his navigator are the only ones who seem concerned with your actual location in this vast emptiness. A few times you see them on the quarterdeck, using a strange-looking wooden instrument to measure the angle of the sun. It's a backstaff, a clever device that allows them to determine the ship's latitude without having to stare directly into the blinding sun. It's an improvement on the older cross staff, but it's still a far cry from precision. Determining. Longitude is another matter entirely, a puzzle so complex that it won't be properly solved for another 50 years. For now, navigation is a combination of this solar measurement, a magnetic compass, and a healthy amount of guesswork known as dead reckoning. It's an art form, really, a kind of optimistic mathematics that makes you appreciate just how brave or foolish these men are to sail out of sight of land in the mid-afternoon. As the heat becomes a heavy blanket, a new sound joins the ship's chorus. One of the men, perched high in the rigging as he mends a tier in a sail, begins to sing. It's not a performance. It's a working song, a sea shanty. His voice is rough but strong, and he sings a line, a call to some forgotten story of the sea. Then, from different parts of the ship, other voices answer him, singing the refrain in a unified chorus. Heave away, haul away, they sing, the melody rising and falling with the swell of the ocean. These songs are not merely for entertainment, they are a tool. The shared rhythm helps coordinate the men's efforts when they need to perform. A task that requires synchronized strength, like hauling on a rope to raise a heavy yardarm. It's a beautifully practical piece of folk art, turning hard labor into a communal, musical effort. Not exactly a chart-topping hit, but it gets the job done. You've noticed the flag the ship is flying? It's not the skull and crossbones you might expect. Instead, it's a simple, solid red flag. The iconic Jolly Roger is a powerful symbol, but the reality of pirate flags in this period is a subject of much scholarly debate. While some pirates did use symbols of skulls and skeletons to inspire terror, many used simpler signals. A red flag, a Jolly Rouge in French, was often a signal that no quarter would be given. A black flag signaled the opposite, that lives would be spared if the target surrendered without a fight. Many ships like this one would often fly the flag of a specific nation, England, France, or Spain as a ruse, only hoisting their true colors at the last possible moment. It's a reminder that piracy was a business, and deception was one of its most important tools. As your watch ends, you are relieved by another crewman, his face weathered into a permanent squint from years of staring at horizons just like this. 1. You are free to move about the ship. You find a shady spot on the foredeck and sit, feeling the fine spray of the sea on your face as the bow cuts through the waves. The sheer scale of the ocean is humbling. You think back to Port Royal, that tiny, crowded, noisy speck of land, so full of silver and ambition. All that wealth, all that frantic energy seems so small and insignificant out here. The real treasure, you think, might just be this immense, quiet liquid peace. The sun begins its slow descent, painting the western sky in fiery colors. The air grows cooler. The work of the day is done. The ship sails on, a steady, rocking cradle on the deep blue sea, carrying you further and further into the calm of the night. Another day is born at sea, and you wake to the familiar sensation of the sun warming the deck planks just beside your face. The air is already warm and carries the promise of real heat to come. The routine is so established now that it feels like you've been living this life for months, not days. The crew moves with a lazy but efficient grace, swabbing the decks, checking the rigging, and exchanging quiet morning greetings. The one-eyed cook is already at work, and the smell of something frying, probably fish, as everything he makes seems to eventually acquire the faint taste of fish mingles with the clean, salty air. Your job for the morning is to help swab the decks. It's mindless work, perfect for a wandering mind. You dip the heavy mop into a wooden bucket of seawater, slosh it onto the deck, and then push the water back and forth in a wide, rhythmic arc. The salt water is a natural disinfectant, keeping the wood clean and free of rot. As you work, you notice the details of the ship's construction. The seams between the planks are packed with a mixture of tar and okama, kind of recycled rope fiber to keep the vessel watertight. It's a constant battle against the sea, which is always trying to find a way in. The social order of the ship has become clearer to you. Remember the ship's articles you thought about before? The written code of conduct that everyone agreed to. You see them in action, not in a dramatic way, but in the small, everyday interactions of the crew. Arguments are settled quickly and quietly by the quartermaster, whose word is law in matters of discipline. There's a strict prohibition against fighting on board the ship. Any disputes are to be saved for the next time you make landfall, where they will be settled with pistol or cutlass. It's a surprisingly progressive workplace policy for an enterprise built on armed robbery. Any man found cheating at cards or dice would face a similar delayed punishment. Speaking of which, games of chance are a popular way to pass the long, empty hours. In the shade of the mainsail, you see a small group of men huddled over a piece of canvas with markings crudely drawn on it. They're playing with dice made from carved bone, their voices a low murmur. The captain, you've learned, dislikes gambling on his ship, not for any moral reason, but because it inevitably leads to quarrels over money, and quarrels lead to poor morale. It's a sensible rule, as it's generally bad for business when your employees stab each other over a game of cards. Not everyone gambles. Near the bow, a man sits alone, patiently carving a piece of driftwood with a small knife. He's making a tiny, detailed sculpture of a seabird. Others are mending their clothes, their needles moving with surprising deftness, or listening to one of the men who has a fiddle. He plays slow, melancholic tunes that seem to hang in the air before being carried away by the wind. It's a strange and peaceful domesticity. You even see Silas, your friend from Port Royal, sitting with his tortoise-shell box on his lap. He's not polishing it today, but simply holding it. As if its presence is a comfort, there is a great deal of scholarly debate surrounding the literacy rates among common sailors of this era. While many were surely unable to read or write, a surprising number were literate. You see evidence of this when the quartermaster makes a notation in the ship's log, and one of the crewmen, a young man from Cork, leans over to read it, his lips moving silently with the words. The shared articles, after all, what it mean? Much if no one could read them. The most peculiar member of the crew is not a man, but a monkey named Jack. He belongs to the captain and is a tiny Capuchin, a refugee from some Spanish plantation. He spends his days scrambling up and down the rigging, chattering at the seagulls, and occasionally stealing biscuits from unattended pockets. The men treat him with a strange mix of affection and annoyance, a tiny, furry mascot for their floating society of outcasts. These animal companions were surprisingly common, a small piece of the natural world to break the monotony of wood and water. The sun reaches its zenith, beating down with an intensity that drives most of the crew to seek shelter. The ship sails on, a steady, unhurried traveler. The day has been one of simple tasks and quiet observations. No great events, no alarms. Just the endless blue, the creak of the ship, and the quiet, ordered lives of the men who call it home. It is a world unto itself, peaceful in its own strange way. And as the afternoon haze settles over the sea, your own mind begins to settle. With it, lulled by the rhythm of the waves and the profound, dreamlike boredom of the open ocean. The gentle, predictable rocking of the ship begins to change. It's a subtle shift at first, a slight quickening of the rhythm, a deeper tilt as the vessel cuts through the rising swells. The wind, which had been a steady, gentle companion, now has a sharper edge to it. It sings a higher, more insistent note as it whips through the rigging. You look up at the sky. The brilliant, uninterrupted blue of the past few days is giving way to a paler, hazier dome streaked with long, thin clouds that look like they've been pulled apart like cotton. A storm is coming. Not a violent hurricane, perhaps, but a squall, a temper tantrum of the sea. The crew, who had been lounging in the afternoon heat, stirs to life. There's no panic, only a quiet, focused energy. The bosun, a man whose voice is as rough as barnacles, begins to issue a series of commands. His calls are echoed by the men as they leap into action. They move with a familiar choreography, a dance they have practiced 100 times. A team of sailors scrambles up the ratlins, their bodies moving like spiders on a web, to reef the sails. This involves partially lowering and then tying up sections of the large square sails to present a smaller surface area to the wind, preventing the powerful gusts from snapping the masts. It is a dangerous, difficult job, requiring balance, strength, and a complete lack of fear of heights. You find a place out of the way, bracing yourself against the mainmast as the deck angles more sharply beneath you. The sea is no longer a gentle, rolling plain. It has become a landscape of deep valleys and dark, shifting hills of water. The ship groans as it climbs one massive swell and then slides down its back, sending a shower of cold spray across the deck. Someone near you mutters a quiet curse as the water soaks him, but no one seems truly alarmed. This is part of the life. One of the older sailors catches your eye and gives you a gap-toothed grin. Just a bit of a breeze, he shouts over the rising wind. You remember hearing one of the crewmen being sharply reprimanded by the quartermaster a few days ago for whistling a tune. You learn later that whistling at sea is considered a serious taboo, a superstition held by sailors across the world. To whistle, they believe, is to whistle up a storm, to mock the wind and challenge it to blow harder. A sensible precaution, perhaps, or maybe just a clever way for captains to get a little peace and quiet. Looking at the churning, gray-green water around you, you decide it's probably for the best that no one is whistling now. In the midst of this controlled activity, one man remains perfectly still. High above the deck, clinging to a small platform at the top of the mainmast, is the lookout. He has the best, and perhaps the worst, view on the entire ship. His job is to stare at the horizon until it becomes something, a career path many modern office workers can relate to. He is lashed to the mast to keep from being thrown into the sea by the violent rocking of the ship. His focus is not on the storm, but on what lies beyond it. And then he calls out. His voice is stretched thin by the wind, but the words are unmistakable. Sail ho. Instantly, the atmosphere on the ship changes again. The focus on battling the weather is replaced by a new, sharper attention. Every man who isn't actively managing a rope or a sail turns his head, squinting in the direction the lookout indicated. The captain raises a long telescope to his eye, bracing it against the mast. You follow their gaze, but all you can see is the gray, chaotic sea. How pirates chose their targets is a matter of some historical uncertainty. While they knew the general shipping lanes, a great deal of their success depended on sheer chance and their ability to patrol vast stretches of ocean hoping for a lucky encounter. Finally, you see it. For a fleeting moment, as your ship crests a particular large wave, you spot a dark speck on the horizon. It's another ship, a distant silhouette fighting through the same squall. The captain lowers his telescope, a grim, unreadable expression on his face. He speaks a quiet word to the quartermaster, who nods and begins to move through the crew, passing on the orders. There is no shouting, no rush to battle stations. Instead, a quiet, almost predatory calm settles over the men. The ship continues its fight against the wind and the waves, but now with a new purpose. It is no longer just a vessel trying to survive a storm. It is a hunter, and it has seen its prey. The world shrinks to the space between two ships, and the wind sounds like a long, slow, held breath. The world narrows to the space between your ship and that distant, struggling speck. The squall, which moments ago was your primary adversary, is now just an inconvenient stage for a new drama. The sea, it seems, was merely the opening act. The captain, no longer looking at the weather, is entirely focused on his prey. He barks. A series of commands to the helmsman, not in a panic, but with the sharp, clipped authority of a man who knows the geometry of the sea. The ship groans in protest as it changes course, leaning hard into the wind, its bow slicing through the gray. Waves at a new angle. This is a chase. But it's not a frantic, Hollywood-style pursuit. It's a slow, calculated dance of two ships against the wind and the waves. A game of angles and endurance. You watch the crew. The lethargy of the past few days has vanished, replaced by a quiet, focused energy. Men move about the deck with purpose, securing lines, checking the lashings on the cannons, and retrieving their personal weapons from sea chests. They check their pistols and sharpen their cutlasses with a diligence usually reserved for payday. There's no bloodlust in their eyes, no crazed shouting. It looks more like a group of skilled laborers preparing for a difficult and slightly dangerous job. They are a surprisingly diverse lot. You see the pale skin of an Englishman working alongside a man whose dark skin speaks of Africa, and another whose weathered features and dark hair suggest a past in the Spanish Isles. The crews of these ships were often a mosaic of nationalities and races, a brotherhood of outcasts composed of escaped slaves, former Navy sailors, and desperate men from all corners of the globe, united by a common desire to escape the brutalities of life on a merchant or a naval vessel. The captain keeps the telescope pressed to his eye, offering a running commentary to the quartermaster. "A merchantman," he says, his voice low but carrying over the wind. "Looks like a brig, heavy in the water. She's not running, just trying to ride out the storm. This is the crucial detail. The other ship isn't trying to flee, which means they likely haven't identified you as a threat yet. Or perhaps they simply can't outrun you in this weather, and they know it." A quick, informal vote is taken among the crew, though the result is as foregone as a sunrise. Everyone agrees to pursue Dot as you draw closer over the next hour. Details on the other ship become clearer. You can see the figures of men on its deck, huddled against the spray. You can make out the flag it's flying, the English red ensign. A merchant ship, almost certainly. The question that hangs in the salty air is whether her crew will fight. Historians still puzzle over how often merchant crews put up a real resistance. They were often underpaid, malnourished, and treated brutally by their captains. They had Little incentive to risk their lives to defend a cargo that did not belong to them. Surrender was often a very attractive option. The captain makes his decision. The time for deception is over. He gives the order to hoist the colors. A man scrambles to the masthead and lowers the English flag you've been flying as a disguise. In its place, a new flag is raised, and it unfurls in the wet, gray wind. It's not the simple red flag of no quarter, nor is it the familiar skull and crossbones. It's a black flag, but on it is a stark white skeleton holding an hourglass in one hand and a bleeding heart in the other. It is the captain's personal ensign, a piece of psychological warfare designed to say, your time is up, and we are prepared to break your heart. Or, stab you, another order is given. A gun crew swarms around one of the small cannons on the foredeck. They move with a practiced speed, loading a round shot and powder. They aim not at the ship itself, but at the water just in front of its bow. The captain shouts, "Fire!" A deafening roar shatters the noise of the storm, and a cloud of thick, acrid smoke momentarily blinds you. The cannonball skips across the churning surface of the sea, a clear and unambiguous warning. Now you wait. The entire ship seems to hold its breath, watching, listening for the response from the other vessel. The gentle rocking of the hull, the only movement in a world suddenly frozen with anticipation. The cannon's roar fades, swallowed by the wind and the sea. The cloud of greasy, white smoke dissipates, revealing the other ship, now much closer, wallowing in a trough between two large waves. For a long moment, nothing happens. The two ships, hunter and prey, simply stare at each other across the churning. Water, on your deck, the men are silent, their hands resting on their weapons, their faces tense. You can feel the ship rising and falling, a slow, deep breath held in the lungs of the ocean. The entire outcome of this encounter hinges on the next few moments, on the decision of a handful of unknown men on that other deck. Then you see it. A flurry of activity on the merchant ship. And then their flag, the proud red ensign of England, begins to slide down the mast. It's a slow, almost mournful descent. The response is a fluttering of white, a surrendered sailcloth. The universal signal for we would very much like to not be on fire. A collective sigh of relief seems to pass through your crew. This will be a quiet affair. The goal was always the cargo, not the fight. A bloody battle risks damaging the prize, and more importantly, the men needed to sail it. This is the ideal outcome, a neat and tidy piece of business. Your captain skillfully brings your sloop alongside the larger brig. A masterful piece of seamanship in the still choppy waters. The two ships are so close now you can see the faces of the other crew. They're a motley bunch, just like yours, but they look weary and resigned, not terrified. They seem less like victims and more like disgruntled employees at a very hostile corporate takeover. Grappling hooks are thrown, their claws biting into the wooden rail of the merchantman, and the two ships are lashed together, groaning as they bump and grind against each other in the swell. A boarding party, led not by the captain but by the quartermaster, swings across onto the other deck. There is no wild screaming or clashing of swords. It's an orderly, almost bureaucratic process. The quartermaster, with a brace of pistols tucked into his belt, calmly informs the merchant captain that his voyage is over. The captured crew is rounded up on the main deck, disarmed, and kept under a watchful but not overtly threatening guard. Now the quartermaster's real work begins. He is here to take inventory and to recruit. He addresses the captured sailors, his voice calm and reasonable over the wind. He tells them they have a choice. They can be left on their ship once it's been relieved of its most valuable assets, or they can join the Brethren of the Coast. He weighs out the terms, a democratic vote on all important matters, a fair share of all plunder as laid out in the articles, and compensation for injuries. To many of these men who are used to meager wages, terrible food, and the lash, it sounds less like a threat and more like a promotion. It's a job interview at sword point, with excellent upward mobility and a rather dramatic severance package. You watch as, one by one, a few of the merchant sailors step forward, nodding their assent. One of them, a young man who can't be more than 20, has a look of pure relief on his face. This was a primary method of recruitment for pirate crews, a constant replenishing of their ranks with experienced sailors who were eager to change their circumstances. While this is happening, the rest of the boarding party is below decks. They are not randomly looting. They are following the quartermaster's direction, seeking out the most valuable and easily transportable goods. Chests of currency, bolts of fine cloth, barrels of wine and brandy, and navigational instruments are brought up to the deck. This distribution of plunder was not a free-for-all. The division would happen later, overseen by the quartermaster to ensure every man, from the captain down to the newest recruit, received the share promised to them in the ship's articles. The storm is passing now. The wind is losing its fury, and the swells are becoming longer and more gentle. Patches of blue are visible in the sky. The work continues in an orderly fashion, a quiet transfer of wealth from one floating vessel to another. The tension is gone, replaced by the quiet satisfaction of a job well done. The two ships rock together gently on the subsiding sea, like old friends who have just concluded a slightly unusual business transaction. The sun, having finally won its battle with the storm clouds, now spills a weak, watery light across the scene. The wind has softened to a weary sigh, and the sea, while still unsettled, has lost its anger. It rolls in long, glassy swells, lifting and lowering the two ships in a slow, hypnotic rhythm. The transfer is complete. The most valuable, least cumbersome portions of the brig's cargo now sit on your deck, a strange collection of crates, barrels, and canvas-wrapped bundles. It's not a mountain of treasure, no overflowing chests of gold doubloons. This was a working ship, not a treasure galleon, but it's a good haul. A profitable day at the office. The quartermaster, his work on the other ship done, swings back aboard your sloop. He gives the captain a slight nod. The merchant crew, those who chose not to join your ranks, are gathered on their own deck, watching you with an air of profound resignation. They are not being held captive. They are simply waiting for you to leave. Your captain now addresses his own crew, his voice calm and carrying easily in the quiet aftermath of the storm. The question is simple: what to do with the captured vessel? It is now officially their prize, their options. They could sink it, a simple and clean solution that ensures it won't be reporting their position to the authorities anytime soon. They could try to sell it, but finding a buyer for a stolen ship is a complicated affair, even in a place as morally flexible as Port Royal. Or they could keep it, adding a second, larger ship to their fleet. This would require splitting the crew, a move that could be either strategically brilliant or dangerously weakening. This decision, like all major decisions, is not for the captain alone to make. It's put to a vote. Every man on the crew, from the lookout who first spotted the prize down to the one-eyed cook, gets an equal say. It's a far more civilized process than any modern corporate board meeting you could imagine. The debate is brief and practical. The brig is slow. It's built for cargo, not for speed. Keeping it would be more trouble than it's worth. The decision is made to simply let it go. The remaining merchant crew will be allowed to continue their journey, albeit with a much lighter load and a very interesting story to tell. It's a generous, if slightly passive-aggressive, act of professional courtesy. It sends a message to other merchantmen: cooperate, and you will be treated fairly. Resist, and, well, that's what the red flag is for Dot as your crew prepares to cast off the grappling lines. you notice one of the last items brought over from the brig. It's a heavy wooden chest with brass fittings, carried with great care by two of your men. It's not filled with silver. It's the merchant ship's medicine chest. This is a prize almost as valuable as hard currency. It contains vials of mercury for treating syphilis, powders of cinchona bark for fevers, and, most precious of all, jars of citrus extracts and tinctures to ward off scurvy. It seems that even the most fearsome outlaws of the sea were not immune to the mundane horrors of vitamin deficiencies and poor life choices. The ship's surgeon, a man whose skills are often as valued as the navigators, will fall upon this chest with a quiet academic glee. It remains a point of contention among maritime historians just how much choice the remaining merchant crew had in their fate. Being set adrift in a recently looted ship wasn't exactly a golden ticket. They had been left with enough food and water to make it to the nearest friendly port, but their journey would be a difficult one. As the last rope is untied and a gap of churning water opens between the two vessels, you see the merchant captain raise a hand. It's not a wave of anger or defiance. It looks from this distance almost like a gesture of thanks, or perhaps just weary acknowledgement. Your sails, now fully unfurled to catch the strengthening breeze, fill with a satisfying snap. The sloop picks up speed, leaving the lumbering brig behind. The new recruits, the men who chose to cross the invisible line between the two decks, are already being integrated into the crew, finding their places, learning the rhythms of their new home. You watch as the brig shrinks on the horizon, a sad, lonely shape on the vast, glittering sea. Your ship, on the other hand, feels alive, energetic, moving with a renewed sense of purpose. The work is done, the risk has paid off, and now the journey continues into the calm, open waters of the late afternoon. The sun is beginning its slow descent, painting the undersides of the scattered clouds in shades of rose and gold. The captured brig is long gone, vanished over the horizon. The sea has calmed completely, its surface a great, deep blue mirror reflecting the evening sky. A celebratory mood, quiet and contained, ripples through the crew. The day's danger has passed, and its rewards are now to be enjoyed. The ship sails on, steady and true, the gentle creak of its timbers and the soft sigh of the wind in the sails providing a peaceful, rhythmic soundtrack. The quartermaster, the man of the hour, has brought the ship's logbook and a set of scales onto the main deck. The crew gathers around, not in a chaotic mob, but in a loose, respectful circle. This is the moment they've been waiting for. It is time to divide the plunder. This is not a frenzied grab for coins. It is a meticulous, almost sacred accounting process, governed by the rules set down in the ship's articles. It's a level of transparency that would make a modern tax agency weep with envy. He begins with the cash. He counts out the Spanish pieces of 8, the English shillings, the French louis d'or, creating small, neat piles on a bolt of captured canvas. According to the articles, the captain receives 2 full shares. The quartermaster, in recognition of his vital role, receives 1.5. Every other man, from the master gunner to the carpenter to the men who just signed on this afternoon, receives 1 full share. It's their signing bonus, a small welcome to the syndicate gift basket, minus the basket and gift. The ship's boys, if there were any, would receive a half share, and a portion is set aside for the compensation fund, the ship's insurance policy against lost limbs and eyes. You watch as each man steps forward to receive his portion. There is no argument, no haggling. The quartermaster's count is final. The men accept their shares with quiet nods, stowing the coins in leather pouches or small chests. The value of the other goods, the cloth, the wine, the navigational tools, is estimated, and their worth is factored into the total. Men might receive a bolt of silk or a cask of brandy as part of their share, whether these carefully laid out Articles were always followed to the letter, especially when tempers flared or the haul was smaller than expected, is a matter lost to the unwritten records of countless drunken arguments. But on this ship, on this day, the code is law. It is this fairness, this brutal equality that binds these men together, that makes them willing to risk their lives for one another. It is the foundation of their small floating republic. With the accounting done, the captain gives his permission for a ration of rum to be distributed. Barrels of captured wine are opened. The mood loosens. The fiddle player from the other day brings out his instrument, and this time the tunes are lively jigs. Some of the men begin to dance on the deck, their movements clumsy but full of joy. Laughter rings out, mixing with the music and the sound of the sea. It's not a wild, drunken debauch. It is a celebration of survival and success. In the midst of the celebration, you overhear a more serious conversation between the captain and the ship's carpenter. They are talking about the hull. The ship is getting sluggish, its bottom fouled, with a thick carpet of barnacles, seaweed, and the dreaded shipworms that can bore through wooden planks. They need to find a secluded, uninhabited cove where they can perform a vital piece of maintenance, careening. This involves beaching the ship on its side during high tide, and then when the tide goes out, frantically scraping, cleaning, and returning the exposed hull. It's a difficult, laborious process that leaves the ship and its crew incredibly vulnerable. But it is essential. Even a floating republic of thieves has to deal with the mundane realities of marine biology and proper vessel maintenance. The party winds down as darkness falls. The men, content and a little richer, find their places to sleep under the vast, star-dusted canopy of the night sky. The ship, heavy with its new cargo, sails on through the darkness. The gentle rocking is a lullaby. The faint smell of wine and sea salt hangs in the air. There is a sense of deep peace, of a job well done, of a community safe and provided for. At least for one more night. The ship wakes with a collective, gentle headache. The morning after the celebration is quiet, the air thick with the memory of wine and the faint, lingering scent of burnt-out lamp oil. The sun climbs a pale, cloudless sky, promising another day of relentless heat. You're back to your routine, your simple tasks, but the atmosphere has shifted. The successful capture, the fair division of the spoils, has solidified the crew's morale. There is a quiet confidence in the air, the relaxed assurance of men who have proven their system works. The new recruits, yesterday's merchant sailors, are already losing their look of startled newcomers and are beginning to blend in, their movements acquiring the familiar role and sway of the ship. The captain, the quartermaster, and the navigator spend the morning huddled over a collection of charts spread across a sea chest on the quarterdeck. The charts are a mix of official printed naval maps and cruder, hand-drawn sketches on vellum, annotated with notes about currents, hidden reefs, and, most importantly, sources of fresh water. The conversation you overheard between the captain and the carpenter last night is now the ship's primary business. They are searching for a careenage, a secluded spot to perform the deep sea, equivalent of putting your car up on blocks to change the oil and scrape the gunk off the undercarriage. For a pirate, being slow is not just an inconvenience. It's a fatal career flaw, right up there with being on fire. The ship's bottom, you learn, is a thriving metropolis of marine life. A thick layer of barnacles, weeds, and mollusks has taken up residence on the hull, creating immense drag that slows the ship down considerably. Worse than these hitchhikers are the teredoworms or shipworms, a type of saltwater clam that looks like a worm and bores through wooden holes with the relentless efficiency of a tiny blind accountant finding a loophole. Left unchecked, they can turn a sturdy oak plank into something with the structural integrity of a damp biscuit. Finding the right spot to deal with this is crucial. It must be a place with a gently sloping, sandy beach protected from the open sea, and most importantly, hidden from view. The navies of England, Spain, and France all have patrols out looking for ships exactly like yours. And a Korean ship beached, helpless, and on its side is the easiest prize they could ever hope. FOR. The precise locations of the most favored careenages were jealously guarded secrets, and historians can only speculate about many of them based on vague descriptions in logbooks and trial records. These men are not just looking at a map. They are consulting a secret library of hard-won knowledge. Life settles back into its oceanic rhythm. The men pass the time with their usual occupations, mending sails, carving wood, playing cards for low stakes. The ship's surgeon, a man named Quincy, who seems far too educated for this line of work, has taken possession of the captured medicine chest. You see him sitting in the shade, carefully organizing the vials and jars, a look of serene contentment on his face. He is like a child on Christmas morning who has just received a chemistry set full of mercury and opium dot. The one-eyed cook is also pleased with the recent acquisition, not with the medicine, but with the turtles. On the deck of the captured brig were several enormous sea turtles kept alive on their backs. These creatures were a vital source of fresh meat for long voyages. They could survive for weeks without food or water, essentially acting as a walking, self-preserving larder. The cook and his mate heave one of the hapless reptiles over and begin the long, messy process of butchering it. The turtle, a creature famous for its slowness, was ironically a key ingredient in maintaining a pirate's ability to move fast, providing the protein and calories needed for the hard labor of sailing and fighting. Later that day, you are served a stew that is rich, slightly gamey, and a welcome change from salted fish and hardtack. It's called cooter stew, and it is, by a wide margin, the best thing you've eaten since leaving Port Royal. Ship sails on, its destination a secret held by the three men on the quarterdeck. Its journey now a slow and deliberate search for a place of safety and renewal. For 2 days, you have been sailing through a maze of small, verdant islands. They are uninhabited, or seem to be, their shores a tangle of mangrove roots, and their interiors a dense, mysterious jungle full of bird calls and the drone of insects. The navigator has been guiding the ship through narrow channels and around hidden sandbars with a quiet confidence that suggests he has been here before. Then, in the late afternoon, you round a rocky headland and enter a small, perfectly formed cove. The water here is calm and impossibly clear, a shimmering sheet of turquoise. The beach is a crescent of fine white sand, and the entire inlet is shielded from the open sea by a high ridge thick with palm trees. It is a place of profound and perfect secrecy. The anchor drops with a splash and a rattle, and the sound seems shockingly loud in the stillness of the cove. The work begins immediately. This is the part of the journey that is not a swashbuckling adventure. This is hard manual labor. The first order of business is to establish a shore camp. It's like a company retreat, but with more mosquitoes and a much higher chance of being discovered by a Spanish warship. 2 longboats are lowered, laden with supplies, casks of water, barrels of salted meat, tools, canvas for tents, and a chest of muskets. A landing party, which includes you, rows to the shore. The moment you step out of the boat, the heat and humidity of the land hit you like a physical blow. The air is thick, sweet, with the scent of decaying vegetation and exotic flowers. The men work with practiced efficiency, setting up a rudimentary camp just inside the tree line. Sentries are posted on the high ridge, men armed with muskets and spyglasses, their sole job to keep a constant watch on the sea approach. Their vigilance is the only thing that stands between this vulnerable community and total disaster. Once the camp is established, the real work begins. On the next high tide, the ship is skillfully maneuvered towards the beach until its keel scrapes against the sand. Most of the cannons, the heavy ballast stones, and all the barrels and crates are painstakingly unloaded and moved to the shore camp. The goal is to make the ship as light as possible. Then, using a system of anchors, ropes, and the ship's own capstan, the crew begins the immense task of heaving the ship onto its side. The vessel groans and protests, its tall masts tilting slowly, unnervingly, towards the beach until it finally comes to rest in the shallow water, half of its hull exposed to the air. For the next few days, the fiercest pirates in the Caribbean will be about as threatening as a turtle on its back, a comparison that feels a little too on the nose, and now you see the source of the ship's sluggishness. The exposed hull is a grotesque masterpiece of marine colonization. It's covered in a thick, crusty layer of barnacles, long strands of green weed, and clusters of mussels. It's a mess. The crew sets to work with long-handled scrapers, chipping, and prying the fouling organisms from the planks. It's a thorough and deeply unpleasant exfoliation for the ship, a spa day from hell. As they scrape, other men follow with buckets of hot tar, melted over a fire on the beach, which they apply to the newly cleaned wood to seal it and poison it against the return of the SHIPWORMS. The work is divided. Some men scrape, some mix tar, some hunt in the island's interior, their muskets echoing in the thick jungle as they search for wild pigs or birds. You are given a scraper. The work is backbreaking, your muscles quickly begin to ache, and the sun beats down on you without mercy. You are struck by the irony of the situation. The punishment for breaking the pirate code, for stealing from a fellow crewman, was often to be marooned left on a deserted island just like this one. And here you all are, willingly marooning yourselves, working harder than any of you have worked before, all for the good of your floating community. Whether these pirates stumbled upon such coves by chance or learned of them through quiet trade with the dwindling native populations is a question that whispers through the historical record without a clear answer. For now, all you know is the scrape of metal on wood, the smell of tar and mud, and the shared, sweating labor of men trying to make their home seaworthy once again. Life on land is a different kind of tiring. You wake not to the gentle rocking of the ship, but to the unyielding stillness of the earth. The air, trapped beneath the jungle canopy, is heavy and wet, and carries 1,000 new smells. Damp soil, sweet, rotting fruit, and the musky scent of animals you have only heard. The jungle is never quiet. It is a riot of sound, the screech of parrots, the incessant, high-pitched hum of insects, the rustle of unseen things in the undergrowth. It is like sleeping inside a giant, poorly tuned musical instrument. You've been on solid ground for 3 days, and your legs are still relearning the fact that the world is not supposed to be constantly swaying. Today, you are spared the back-breaking work of scraping barnacles. You are part of the water detail. Fresh water is the lifeblood of any voyage, more precious than rum, more critical than gold. The casks from the ship are nearly empty, and the water that remains is stale and green. Led by the quartermaster, a small group of you, armed with muskets and empty barrels, ventures inland. You follow a barely there trail into the dense jungle, the light dimming under the thick leaves. After a 20-minute walk that leaves you drenched in sweat, you find it, a small, clear stream tumbling over smooth, mossy rocks. The process of watering is a slow and careful art. First, a man tastes the water cautiously to ensure it's not brackish. Then, the barrels are rinsed and scoured with sand and gravel before being filled. Each barrel is then sealed tight by the ship's cooper, a man whose skill at making wood watertight is far more developed than his skill at obeying the laws of any nation. A leaky cask could mean the difference between life and death on a long, Voyage. You help roll the heavy, filled barrels back to the beach, a laborious process that gives you a new appreciation for the simple act of turning on a tap. Back at the camp, life has settled into a strange domestic routine. The one-eyed cook has built a large fire pit and is attempting to roast a wild pig that the hunting party brought back. Quincy, the ship's surgeon, is not resting. You see him wandering at the edge of the jungle, carefully gathering leaves and roots, adding to his collection of remedies. The mosquitoes, you have discovered, are a far more persistent and democratic threat than the Spanish Navy. They bite. Everyone with equal enthusiasm. You wander over to the beach sloop, a helpless giant resting on the sand. The first side of the hull is nearly clean, and you can see the exposed planks, pale and scarred. The ship's carpenter is at work, and he is not just supervising. He is the ship's doctor, performing a detailed physical examination. He moves along the hull, tapping it with a small mallet, his head cocked as he listens to the sound. He is listening for the hollow thud that signifies worm-eaten wood. When he finds a suspect plank, he probes it with a sharp awl, his face a mask of concentration. You see him pry out a section of wood, revealing a honeycomb of tunnels bored by relentless shipworms. It is a slow, meticulous surgical procedure. He and his mate will cut out the damaged sections and fit new pieces of wood, cocking them securely before the hot tar is applied. It is hard for historians to know just how much the strict hierarchy of the ship relaxed during these periods of forced land-based domesticity. The quartermaster still directs the work, but the lines of authority seem softer here. Men talk more freely, their voices less guarded than they are on the close confines of the deck. In the evenings, they gather around the fire, sharing stories, singing songs, and gambling with dice made from the bones of the turtle you all ate. It feels less like a pirate encampment and more like a rugged, slightly dangerous all-male camping trip. For a few days, you are not pirates. You are laborers, carpenters, hunters, and water-bearers, a small self-sufficient village whose only goal is to heal your wounded ship and return to the sea. The fourth day in the cove dawns bright and punishingly hot. The first side of the hull is finished. It gleams black and sleek with fresh tar, its surface smooth and hostile to any freeloading barnacle. Now comes the most dangerous part of the whole operation. The ship must be turned over. It's a process that looks, from a distance, like trying to flip a very large, very heavy pancake with nothing but ropes and brute force. There's no room for error. A snapped rope or a sudden shift in weight could break the ship's back, leaving you all permanently stranded on this forgotten little island. The tension is a palpable thing, thick as the humid air. The entire crew, save for the sentries on the ridge, is assembled. Ropes are re-rigged, anchors are reset in the sand, and the capstan is manned. The quartermaster directs the operation with a series of sharp, clear commands. The men heave. The capstan clicks, the ropes strain, taut as fiddle strings, and the great vessel groans, a deep, wounded sound from the very soul of the wood. For a moment, nothing happens. And then, slowly, agonizingly, the ship begins to move. It tilts, rises, and then settles onto its other side with a great sigh of displaced water and sand. A cheer goes up from the men, a sound of pure relief. Now, they just have to do the entire scraping and tarring process all over again during the long, hot afternoons of the following days. While the scraping and hammering continues, the captain calls a parliament. This is not a metaphor. The crew gathers in the shade of the palm trees, sitting on logs and upturned barrels. It is a formal council. Here, on the neutral ground of the shore, plans are made and disputes are settled. The captain lays out the options for their next voyage. They could sail north to the promising, less patrolled waters off the coast of the Carolinas, or they could return to the familiar hunting grounds of the Spanish Main. Men speak their minds. debating the merits of each plan. In the end, a vote is taken and the majority rules. It is a more efficient and representative form of government than anything happening in London at the time. This is also where personal grievances, the kind forbidden from erupting into violence on the ship, are finally addressed. Two of the crewmen, who have been nursing a silent grudge over a card game for weeks, are given permission to settle their affair. They walk, with their seconds, to a secluded clearing down the beach. How many of these disputes settled ashore ended in a handshake versus a shallow grave is a statistic buried with the men who made them. You just know that only one of them walks back to the camp later, his expression grim. Finally, the work is done. The hull is clean, patched, and sealed on both sides. The ship is ready. They wait for the spring tide, the highest tide of the month, to refloat her. Once again, the ropes and capstan are brought to bear. With the tide lifting and the men heaving, the sloop slides off the sand and into the deep water of the cove. With a gentle splash, she floats high and proud, looking faster and more dangerous already. The camp is broken down with startling speed, every trace of your presence erased. Barrels, cannons, and supplies are ferried back and stowed. The last men to leave are the sentry's dot as the anchor is raised. You look back at the perfect, empty beach. It feels strange to leave. You are leaving a place of immense labor and vulnerability, but also a place of strange peace. As the sloop sails out of the protected cove and into the open sea, you can feel the difference. The ship feels nimble, alive, eager. She cuts through the waves with a newfound grace. The work was hard, the risk was great, but it was worth it. The ship is whole again, a clean and efficient predator, ready to hunt. The open sea feels like a homecoming. After the stifling stillness of the cove, the constant, living motion of the ship is a comfort. The world is once again a vast circle of blue, but the ship herself feels transformed. She moves with a new liveliness, slicing through the waves with an ease you had forgotten she possessed. The heavy, sluggish drag is gone, replaced by a responsive grace. The crew feels it too. There is a lightness in their steps, a renewed energy, born from the satisfaction of hard work well done, and the simple joy of a clean, fast ship under their feet. They have voted to sail north towards the sprawling, sparsely populated coast of the American colonies, where the pickings might be thinner, but the naval patrols are said to be even thinner. Life quickly settles back into the familiar rhythm of the sea, a routine dictated by the sun and the wind. The days are marked by the changing of watches, the creak of the rigging, and the endless, soothing whisper of water against the hull. With the ship's maintenance complete, the crew's attention turns to another critical aspect of a long voyage. The provisions. The wild pig from the island is a distant, happy memory. You're back to the staples. The foundation of the diet is ship's biscuit, also known as hardtack. It is essentially a flour and water cracker baked until it is as hard as a piece of lumber. Often baked months or even years in advance, it had a shelf life that would make a modern doomsday prepper weep with envy to eat it. You must first break it, which is often done by smashing it against the side of the ship or using the pommel of a knife. Then you soak the pieces in water, coffee, or whatever liquid is available until it achieves the consistency of a thick, lumpy porridge. This is your bread, and it comes with friends. The casks of biscuit are inevitably infested with weevils, small black beetles that burrow into the crackers. The sailors had a grim joke. It was better to eat your biscuit in the dark so you couldn't see what was eating it along with you. Extra protein, they called it. This starchy diet is supplemented with salted meat beef or pork cured in brine and packed in barrels. It is tough, intensely salty, and after a few weeks at sea, it takes on a strange metallic taste. The one-eyed cook does his best, boiling it for hours to soften it and leach out some of the salt, often adding it to a stew with dried peas or beans. It's food that is designed not for pleasure, but for endurance. It fills the belly and keeps you alive. And that is all you can ask of it. You notice the ship's cat, a sleek black creature named Hazard, patrolling the deck with a silent, lethal intensity. He is not a pet. He is a vital member of the crew. He earns his keep by waging a one-cat war against the rats, a conflict far more ancient and relentless than any squabble between England and Spain. His presence is considered good luck, a small guardian against the vermin that can spoil food and gnaw through ropes. The precise understanding of why citrus worked to prevent scurvy remained a mystery to the most learned men of the age, with some surgeons attributing its effects to its acidic nature rather than any specific nutrient. For now, the precious drops of lime juice that Quincy the surgeon rations out are treated like a magic potion, a charm against the creeping rot that every sailor fears. The crew is in good spirits, but there is a quiet undercurrent of superstition. No one has whistled since you left the careenage, and you notice that the captain, despite a favorable wind, waited an extra day before leaving the cove. You learn later that the day they were set to leave was a Friday. To set sail on a Friday was considered the height of bad luck, an invitation for disaster. It was a superstition so deeply ingrained that even the most hardened and rational captains would often bow to it, preferring to lose a day of sailing rather than tempt fate. The ship sails on, a self-contained world charting a course for new waters, its success dependent not just on the skill of its crew, but on the hardness of its biscuits and the whims of its luck. Days bleed into one another, each one a copy of the last, painted in endless shades of blue and white. The ship is making good time, sailing north, and the climate is slowly, subtly changing. The air has lost some of its thick tropical humidity. The sun feels less like a hammer and more like a warm blanket. In the mornings, a cool mist hangs over the water, and the sea itself has shifted from turquoise to a deeper, colder-looking blue-gray. The flying fish of the Caribbean have been replaced by porpoises that sometimes race the ship's bow, their sleek bodies arching through the waves in a display of pure, unbridled joy. The men watch them with a quiet appreciation. It is a welcome distraction from the vast, beautiful monotony of the open ocean. Your new destination. Somewhere along the coast between the Virginia and Carolina colonies is a place none of the crew has been before. This presents a new challenge, one that rests squarely on the shoulders of the navigator. His work, which seems straightforward in the familiar waters of the Spanish Main, has become a far more difficult and uncertain art. He spends hours on the quarterdeck, his eye pressed to the backstaff, measuring the sun's height at noon to determine your latitude. That part is manageable. You can know how far north or south you are with reasonable accuracy, but knowing how far east or west you've gone is basically a form of educated guessing, like predicting the mood of a royal court. This is the great, unsolved puzzle of the age, the problem of longitude. To know your longitude, you need to know the precise time aboard the ship, and at that exact same moment, the precise time at a fixed point on land, like London. The difference between the two times tells you how far around the world you are. The problem is, no clock exists that can keep accurate time on a rolling, pitching, temperature-shifting ship. Pendulum clocks are useless. Everything is guesswork. The navigator relies on the ancient method of dead reckoning. It's a process of tracking your speed and direction and making a big X on the map where you think you probably are. To measure speed, a sailor throws a chip log, a small weighted piece of wood attached to a long, knotted rope off the stern. As the ship moves away, they count how many knots in the rope unspool over a set period of time, measured with a sandglass. This is where the term knots for a ship's speed comes from. It's clever, but it's an approximation at best. Currents, wind, and human error all introduce inaccuracies that compound over time. It's surprisingly effective, right up until the moment you discover an island that the map insists is 50 miles to your left. Historians debate how much these crews relied on stolen official charts versus their own painstakingly compiled. Secret maps pass from one captain to another like treasured family recipes for larceny. The navigator on the ship has a collection of both, and he pores over them. His face a mask of intense calculation, cross-referencing, measuring, and muttering to himself. The entire ship's safety rests on these calculations, on his ability to find a small harbor on a vast, unfamiliar coastline without running aground on a hidden reef dot, as if to underscore the uncertainty of your position in the world. You are constantly reminded of the ship's other residents, the rats. They're the ship's oldest passengers, having boarded generations ago and never bought a ticket. You hear them at night, scratching and scurrying in the dark spaces behind the walls of the hold. They are a constant gnawing presence, a reminder of decay and imperfection in this small, orderly world of wood and sail. One afternoon, you see two sailors huddled over a bucket, their faces lit with a grim excitement. They have trapped a rat and are baiting it with a piece of salted beef, a cruel and simple form of entertainment born from the endless boredom of the sea. It is a small, ugly moment in the otherwise peaceful routine. The ship sails on, a tiny, man-made speck of order in a vast chaos, held on course by an artist who is painting your position on a map with a brush made of rope, sand, and faith. Announcement comes not as a shout, but as a quiet word passed from man to man. Land. After weeks of seeing nothing but the endless, shifting curve of the horizon, the word itself feels strange on the tongue. You follow the pointing fingers to the west, and at first you see nothing. Then you see it. It's not the sharp, mountainous green of a Caribbean island, but a low, hazy line, a dark smudge between the gray sea and the pale sky. It is the coast of the Carolinas. It looks quiet, subdued, and deliberately designed to make a navigator's life difficult. As you draw closer, the featureless line resolves into a long, thin ribbon of sand and scrubby trees. This is the Outer Banks, a barrier of islands that protects the mainland from the full fury of the Atlantic. It is a treacherous place, a ship's graveyard famous for its shifting shoals, strong currents, and sudden storms. But for a ship like yours, a vessel that has no desire to be seen, this treacherous nature is a virtue. The same complex network of inlets, sounds, and tidal creeks that makes it a nightmare for a deep-drafted naval frigate, makes it a paradise for a shallow-drafted sloop looking to disappear. The captain, the navigator, and the quartermaster are in constant, quiet consultation. Their destination is not a bustling port like Charleston, but one of the dozens of unnamed inlets that offer a passage into the calm waters of the sounds beyond. Your speed is reduced. A man is sent to the bow, armed with one of the ship's most ancient and important tools. He holds a lead line, a long, thin rope with a heavy lead weight at the end. He swings it once, twice, and then releases it, letting the weight fly forward and sink into the sea. As the ship glides over the spot, he hauls the line in, reading the depth from colored markers tied into the rope. By the mark 5, he calls out, his voice clear and rhythmic. 5 fathoms, 30 feet. Deep enough, but the lead line does more than measure depth. This is the clever part. The bottom of the lead weight is hollowed out and filled with a thick, sticky tallow. When the lead hits the seabed, it brings back a sample. It's the 17th century equivalent of a deep-sea geological survey. After one cast, the sailor brings the lead to the navigator, who inspects the greasy substance in its hollow. He sniffs. It rubs it between his fingers. Fine gray sand, he mutters, then turns to his chart, comparing the sample to the notations. Another cast might bring up mud or crushed shells or sticky clay. Each reading tells him not just how deep the water is, but where he is. Confirming his position on a coastline with few reliable landmarks, you glide slowly along the coast, the sounding line swinging in a steady rhythm, a constant conversation between the ship and the seabed. It is a slow, cautious process, feeling your way into a new world. The air smells different here. It smells of pine trees and damp earth, a scent that is cleaner and sharper than the sweet, heavy perfume of the tropics. You see no signs of life, no smoke, no other sails. It feels as if you have sailed to the edge of the world, whether the pirates who haunted these shores were welcomed as partners, tolerated as a necessary evil, or simply feared by the scattered local colonists is a question historians still untangle with great difficulty. The truth was likely a messy combination of all three, changing from one settlement to the next. For now, the welcome is one of utter silence. It is, you reflect, a pleasant change from the usual reception, which often involves cannon fire. As the sun begins to set, the navigator finally finds the inlet he has been searching for. The ship turns, leaving the open ocean behind, and slips through a narrow channel into the vast, calm, and secretive waters of Pamlico Sound. You have arrived. You are a ghost, sliding into a landscape of water and marsh grass, ready to do business in a land that is very good at keeping secrets. You have been anchored for 2 days in a secluded tidal creek, a winding waterway hidden from the main body of the Sound by a screen of tall marsh grass and cypress trees draped in Spanish moss. The location is perfect. Your ship is completely invisible from more than a few hundred yards away, yet a lookout perched high in the rigging of the mainmast has a clear view of the surrounding waters. The only sounds are the cawing of crows and the gentle lapping of the water against the hull. After the boisterous energy of Port Royal, this profound quiet feels like another country entirely, which, of course, it is. The business model here is different. You are not here to sell your plunder in an open market amidst the clamor of taverns and auction blocks. You are here to engage in a quieter, more discreet form of commerce. The colonies are subject to England's Navigation Acts, a series of laws that force them to trade only with the mother country, using English ships and paying English taxes. The result is that imported goods, wine, cloth, tools, sugar are expensive and often scarce. A ship like yours, laden with goods acquired without the inconvenient overhead of actually paying for them, is a welcome, if technically illegal, source of bargains. The colonists operate on a very practical, if unspoken, don't ask, don't tell policy regarding where their cheap brandy comes from. On the third morning, a small, flat-bottomed boat, a skiff, is spotted making its way towards you. It carries 2 men. They are not pirates. They are farmers or local merchants, dressed in the plain, homespun cloth of the colonies. There is no alarm, no call to arms. This is the meeting you've been waiting for. How the signal was given or the meeting arranged is a mystery. There are quiet, scholarly debates about whether these encounters relied on established codes and trusted intermediaries, or if each was a new, dangerous improvisation. Watching the calm, deliberate way the quartermaster prepares to greet the visitors, you suspect it is the former. This is not their first time at this particular rodeo. The skiff pulls alongside, and after a quiet exchange of greetings, one of the men is invited aboard. He is a planter, a man who grows tobacco, and he has come to trade. He doesn't have silver coins. He has something almost as good, tobacco leaves, cured and bundled, and information. He and the quartermaster sit on a crate on the main deck, speaking in low voices. It's a negotiation, but it has the relaxed feel of 2 old business partners catching up. It's a pop-up shop for contraband, but with more muskets and fewer artisanal cheeses, a deal is struck. a certain amount of tobacco for several bolts of Spanish silk, and a small cask of French brandy. Your crew helps transfer the goods, a quiet and efficient transaction on the still water of the creek. The planter's eyes linger on the goods with a look of quiet satisfaction. The silk will fetch a high price in Williamsburg, and the brandy will warm his winter. The friendliness of the locals, with a touch of sarcasm, seems to increase in direct proportion to the quality of the goods you have for sale. Before he leaves, the planter gives the quartermaster the information he was paid for. He tells of a merchant ship laden with English wool and hardware expected to pass the outer shoals in a week's time. He provides details of its likely course and its destination. This is the other currency you trade in, intelligence. The planter gets his luxury goods without paying the king's tax, and you get the location of your next target. It is a quiet, symbiotic relationship, a hidden economy that benefits the outlaws and the colonists alike. As the skiff pulls away and disappears back into the maze of the marsh, you are struck by the contrast with the Caribbean. In Port Royal, the pirates were the city. Here, they are a rumor, a whisper in the reeds, a ghost ship that brings cheap. Silk and disappears with the morning mist. The ship slips out of the sheltered creek at dawn, a silent shadow gliding from the dark. Tannin-stained water of the Sound back into the vast gray expanse of the Atlantic. The information from the planter is your new compass. You are no longer aimlessly searching. You are waiting for an appointment. You sail to a position just over the horizon from the main shipping lane, a place where you can see without being easily seen. And then you wait. Waiting is a huge part of this life, a state of being that is either maddeningly boring or deeply peaceful, depending on your state of mind. For a mind seeking rest, it is a gift. The days pass in a slow, hypnotic rhythm. The ship rocks gently on the long, lazy swells of the open sea. The routine is so familiar now it has become second nature. Swab the decks, mend the sails, watch the horizon. The only thing that marks the passage of time is the ship's bell. A young ship's boy has the duty of watching the half-hour sand glass. When the last grains of sand run through, he turns the glass over and strikes the bell. One bell for the first half hour of a 4-hour watch, 2 for the first hour, and so on, up to 8 bells, which signals the end of the watch and the changing of the guard. The clear, resonant chime of the bell is the only clock you need, a steady, patient heartbeat for the ship. The crew is calm, their confidence buoyed by the full hold and the promise of one last, easy prize before seeking a longer refuge for the winter. In the evenings, one of the older sailors tells stories. He speaks of other pirates who have made this coast their home, men like Edward Teach, the infamous Blackbeard who, it is said, had a cozy arrangement with the governor of North Carolina himself, buying protection and legitimacy with a share of his plunder. The tale is a comforting one, a reminder that their business model, this strange partnership between outlaw and colony, has a history here. Of course, the line between a sanctioned privateer and a full-blown pirate syndicate was often just a matter of which governor was in office, a detail historians still untangle with a mixture of legal documents and educated guesswork. On the 5th day of waiting, the lookout's call comes. Sail ho. This time, it's not a surprise. It's an expectation fulfilled. The distant sail is exactly where the planter said it would be, as predictable as a tax bill. The captain raises his telescope. It's her. A lumbering English merchantman, her sails full, her course steady, sailing with the naive confidence of someone who believes the ocean is empty. Your ship, freshly cleaned and nimble, comes to life. The crew moves to their stations with a quiet efficiency. The plan is simple. You have the advantage of speed and surprise. You approach from her stern quarter, the angle from which you are Hardest to spot, the wind is in your favor. By the time the merchant ship's lookout finally sees you, you are already closing, moving far faster than they are. You see a flash of panic on their deck, men running, pointing. They are caught completely off guard. The captain gives the order, and your black flag with its grim, time-keeping skeleton is hoisted. The psychological effect of the flag is often more powerful and certainly more cost-effective than a broadside of cannon. It is a promise of violence that makes actual violence unnecessary. You fire a single warning shot, the cannonball skipping across the water just in front of her bow. It is a question. The answer comes quickly. The merchant captain, faced with a faster, more aggressive vessel and a crew that has very little interest in dying for a cargo of wool, makes a sudden, wise adjustment to his schedule. His flag comes down. There will be no fight. The entire chase, from sighting to surrender, has taken less than an hour. It was not a battle. It was a business transaction conducted at high speed, with the implied threat of extreme bodily harm as a negotiating tactic. Your sloop glides alongside the larger vessel, and the grappling hooks fly. The air is calm, the sea is flat. It is, by all accounts, a beautiful day for armed robbery. The process is smooth, orderly, and almost disappointingly devoid of drama. The boarding party, led once again by the quartermaster, secures the captured vessel without a single sword being drawn. The merchant crew, looking more annoyed than terrified, are gathered and offered the usual career change opportunity. A few of the younger ones, perhaps tired of the low pay and endless dampness of the English coast, accept the offer. The rest are simply relieved that the encounter did not end in bloodshed. The transfer of cargo begins. Bales of English wool, crates of iron tools, barrels of nails, and casks of beer are hoisted from the merchant's hold and lowered into yours. Your ship settles lower in the water, heavy with its success. The hold is now full. The ship is rich. The crew is content. There is enough plunder to ensure every man a comfortable winter. The captain makes the decision. The merchant ship is released, its crew left with a story that will surely improve with every telling. Your ship turns away, its sails catching the afternoon breeze, and heads for a quiet, predetermined harbor, a place to disappear until the spring. The work is done. You sail south along the coast, the setting sun turning the sky into a masterpiece of orange and purple. You think of the cycle of this life, the patient hunting, the sudden violence, the division of spoils, and the quiet periods of rest and repair. It is a strange, brutal, and yet surprisingly stable existence. Many of these men dream of retiring, of taking their share and buying a small plot of land, perhaps in the very colonies they terrorize, and melting back into the world of planters and merchants. A surprising number of them will succeed, their pasts forgotten or woefully ignored by their new neighbors. The ultimate fate of most common pirates, however, remains a mystery, their stories ending not with a grand finale, but by simply fading from the historical record. They are ghosts, not just on the water, but in the pages of history itself. As true darkness falls, the ship sails on under a sky spilling over with stars. The sea is calm, a vast sheet of black glass that shatters into 1,000 silver pieces where the moonlight touches it. The air is cool and clean, and the only sounds are the gentle creak of the mast and the soft, rhythmic whisper of the water. Parting before the bow, the day's work is a distant memory, the tension gone, replaced by a deep and profound quiet. The men are asleep, scattered across the deck, their bodies rising and falling with the slow, gentle breath of the ship. They are a silent company, their dreams their own, their violent profession put to rest for the night. You find a comfortable place, the gentle rocking of the ship, a perfect, unending lullaby, a cradle in the deep. The ship moves through the darkness, a steady, peaceful traveler on an endless sea. There's nothing more to do. Nothing to think about. There's only the soft rocking, the cool air, and the deep, dreamless quiet of the ocean at night. The sea is a terrible place to make a living. You reflect drowsily, but it is a wonderful place to drift off to sleep. There is only the rocking of the ship, the whisper of the waves, and the slow, easy journey into the quiet of the night.